I'd like to call to order the Milan Area Schools Board of Education regular meeting for Monday, February 12th, 2024. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you to everyone attending and those who will be watching online. All board members are present except for Ms. Rosen Leacher is excused and Ms. Gutierrez is excused this evening. And student board member Ms. Farrow is present and Ms. Powell is not present at this time. I do want to start off just with some thoughts. We did have a student that had a medical condition at the middle school last week. Mr. Gearbaugh will be providing an update in regards to that student, but I just wanted to take a moment for us to send positive thoughts to his family and himself as a patient. Just take some time to send positive thoughts to them before we start this meeting. All right, and like I said, Mr. Gearbaugh will be providing an update as part of his comments. So we'll start off with communications and community engagement with public comments. A reminder, this meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public meeting. There are 2 times for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. When addressing the board, you'll be asked to state your name. The board determines the amount of time granted to individuals or groups to speak. Each person shall be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes. Board members may question speakers but are not obligated to answer questions or make statements or commitments in response to issues raised by the public. In general, such items will be referred to the superintendent for advisement, investigation, study, and/or recommendation, or designated as future agenda items for board consideration. Are there any students who'd like to address the board? Are there any public members who'd like to address the board? All right. Next up, I need a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of January 31st, 2024.
Moved by Farrow.
Support by Murray.
It's been moved and supported to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of January 31st, 2024. Are any comments or concerns? All right, it's been moved and supported to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of January 31st, 2024. Ms. Heika.
Heika, yes. Murray?
Yes.
Pryor?
Yes.
Sislo?
Yes.
Farrow?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
All right, next up, I need a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting closed session of January 31st, 2024.
Moved by Murray.
Support by Pryor.
So moved and supported to approve the minutes of the regular meeting closed session of January 31st, 2024. Any concerns? These are the ones that are found in the transparent envelope. It's been moved and supported to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the closed session of January 31st, 2024. Ms. Heika.
Murray?
Yes.
Pryor?
Yes.
Sislo?
Yes.
Farrow?
Yes.
Heika, yes. Motion carries 5-0.
All right, next up, I need a motion to approve the bills and reimbursement of expenses.
Moved by Farrow.
Support by Heika.
So moved and supported to approve the bills and reimbursement of expenses. Questions or concerns?
Mrs. Sislo.
Yes, Mr. Farrow.
I just wanted the board to be aware that I did go through the payment register. I had a few questions on a few of the checks, and they were promptly answered by Krista Hendricks.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions or concerns? All right, it's been moved and supported to approve the bills and reimbursement of expenses. Ms. Heika.
Pryor?
Yes.
Sislo?
Yes.
Farrow?
Yes.
Heika, yes. Murray?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
I will collect your closed minutes. Meeting minutes. Thank you. All right, on to board organization. I need a motion to approve the change of date for the February 28th, 2024 regular meeting as detailed in attachment A.
Motion by Pryor.
Support by Farrow.
So moved and supported to approve the change of date for the February 28th, 2024 regular meeting as detailed in attachment A. We are going to be moving that meeting from Wednesday, the 28th, to Monday, the 26th, 2024, at 7 PM in the same location. It's just in order to meet the schedules of some of us in regards to that meeting. So that will be reflected on the website and posted. So, any questions in regards to moving that meeting? All right, it's been moved and supported to approve the change of date for the February 28th, 2024 meeting as detailed in attachment A. Ms. Heike?
Sislo,
Yes.
Pharaoh,
Yes.
Heike, yes. Murray,
Yes.
Pryor.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
All right, thank you. All right, now on to our strategic plan business in the area of finance and operations. We will consider a general fund budget amendment as an attachment B. This is a first reading. This is our first budget amendment that we'll receive for the budget year that we are in. For those of you who don't know, in general, we set a budget in the summer for the school year. And then as things become more evident throughout the year, the central office and finance, Ms. Hendricks goes through and makes adjustments and even more educated guesses with the information that we have at hand, and that's what this amendment is going to be showing us. So we will turn it over to Ms. Hendricks.
Okay, I do apologize, I forgot to make copies. Brian, did you provide copies?
I think we got them in.
Everybody have it?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, we're good.
I do apologize for that. What you're seeing in front of you is the first amendment for this year's budget. You will see some major swings, especially in the state aid line item. That is due to a number of grants or funding sources that were not available to us in June when we adopted the budget. It also includes carryover on grants that I don't budget in June because I don't know how much that's going to be. We had a number of grants that had significant increases in our allocations. We had extra 100,000 added to our adult ed and an extra 200,000 added to our GSRP. Those are things that were unknown to me when I built the original budget. So we do see a substantial swing in the state aid revenue. If you look at the first column, that is what the adopted budget was. That is what you voted on in June. At this point, I am increasing the revenues from 29 million to 32 million, with over 2 million of that being in state funding. In the second section, I am increasing the expenditures from 32 million to 33.8 million, which is an increase of 1.8. We are still projecting the use of fund balance, but we're not expecting to use as much fund balance as I said we possibly would in June. Some of the large number increases that you're seeing in the expenditures, like for basic programs, those are grants that, here, Michelle. There are grants in there that I didn't have in the original budget. If you turn to the second page, you will see that grants with offsetting expenditures and revenues, I'm adding $1.5 million in expenditures and $1.5 million in revenues due to changes in grants. In June, when I built the budget, I was not aware that the district would be receiving enrollment stabilization money. It appears that based on the most recent state aid statement, we're receiving $200,000 in enrollment stabilization, and we're receiving another $299,000 in district transportation expense money. None of those figures were available to us. I will also tell you that this is as of the January February state aid, but these numbers have been fluctuating, so by the time June gets here, they may have adjusted somewhat between then and now. Our foundation, our pupil count went down a little bit, so I'm looking at reducing what I had budgeted for the foundation. We have a slight increase in property tax values. We have a substantial increase in the amount of retirement money that the state is giving us to offset our retirement expenses. And we did receive almost $400,000 of additional Act 18 money in December from the ISD. For expenditures, you will see that there is a MIPSR's UAAL rate stabilization change of 362. It's both a revenue and an expense. It offsets itself. That's money that we receive in our state aid and then have to turn around 4 days later and give back to the state. One of the expenses that I have listed is the E-rate switch purchase that you as a board approved. Some of the changes to our staffing amounts had to do with a lot of staff turnover and replacing more veteran teachers with less experienced teachers, so their pay rates were different. We did that with 3 out of 4 social workers. We did that with the veteran, we had a veteran high school counselor leave. There, we did experience a slight reduction to our consortium tuition. If you look at the bottom line, I had anticipated a spend of $2.7 million of our fund balance in June. At this point, I am anticipating an expenditure of $1.6 million, and that will leave us an estimated fund balance of $3,307,000. Just so that you guys are aware, and I know that Ryan has mentioned it in a number of his comments, that the grants that he's applying for, the grants that we're experiencing. There are a number of items I don't have in this budget because I don't know yet what they are. I sat through a hour-long session today on some potential grant funding that we can receive for early warning, early literature, or early lit, pre-K to 5. But we don't know all of the hoops that we're going to have to jump through. The one thing that was stressed this morning was that all staff have to participate in a professional development session. We don't know what that's going to look like. We don't know how much money we're getting. Ryan has been researching it, and I know he's working with other curriculum people across the county to figure out where we need to be. But I just wanted to reinforce that there are so many unknowns out there. There is a loan repayment, student loan repayment grant, but we don't know, I don't know who qualifies. We have to survey the staff.
So that was to repay the student loans of staff, of teachers?
Yes.
Right, okay, okay.
But only certain teachers and
Okay.
only certain student loans.
Gotcha, yeah.
So we don't know what that's going to be. That type of information is not reflected in this budget. I have information on water filtration systems. EGLE, the Department of Environmental Services, has a memo out. They released a press release last week, but we don't know what that's going to entail. They're telling us to hold off until they get more information, but we don't know when more information is coming. So, just so that you can see the joys of grants and state funding, I wanted to go through some of that with you. Does anybody have any questions?
Mr. Sislo,
Yeah, Mr. Farrow.
I know you're surprised I have questions. On attachment B, under revenue, I think the code is 300. There's an increase of 2.3 $1 million. And I know you talked about grants. I just want to confirm that that also includes money from the state for free breakfast.
It actually does not. The breakfast money will be included in a future budget amendment to the food service fund.
Got it.
All of that is self-contained. I did not have that ready to present to you today. It will come in the future. I can tell you that the money is coming in. That's going to be another guessing game, though, because we get funds based on the kids that eat, and I don't know who's going to eat. But yeah, none of that food service funding is reflected in this.
Okay, thank you. On expenditures, I think the GL code is 400. There's a $50,000 figure for site improvement services, and I just want to confirm that that's for the FFA building?
Our FFA program has asked for a $50,000 grant, and it is through Eaton ISD. It is to help offset the cost of building the barn that is partially constructed behind our high school. They have also received other funding, and the FFA out of their internal account will be covering some of the cost. There should be no cost to the district. This $50,000 is offset by revenues that are coming in.
Because the grant will cover it.
Yes.
Okay. And then just one other thing here. In the budget amendment that's being proposed, are we accounting for building and grounds repairs, maintenance, roofing?
There have been increases to this budget
Okay.
for out of the ordinary expenditures for roofing, for facade work on a couple of our buildings. I believe there's a boiler from the high school that's in there. There's carpeting for the middle school that will go along with our transition of students next year.
Okay.
So yeah, they are in there, they're just not itemized.
And then one last question is about health insurance premiums. Have we anticipated any increases in the new amendment, in the proposed amendment?
The proposed amendment accounts for the changes to the health care that I am aware of
Okay.
already. So everything,
That we
to the
know
best
now.
of my knowledge, everything is in there.
And remember, with that change, we only feel 6 months of it in this budget.
Yeah, got it. Just one final note regarding the fund balance. I do want the board to note that it is the overall fund balance is projected to improve, but we are still not above the hopeful threshold of 10%. I just want the board to be aware. So thank you, Krista, for your work on all of this.
I do just want to add one comment, and Ms. Hendricks did a great job of discussing a lot of it. The good thing is the majority of the unknowns that could still come at us are mostly in grants, which means they'll be offsetting, we only spend what we get. So a lot of those shouldn't have an effect on the bottom line of the budget. It will just be increasing expenditures with the same amount that we increase the revenue for the grant. So there are still possibly a lot of changes coming, but most of those will not have an effect on the bottom line of the budget in either direction.
Mr. Sislo?
Yeah, Mr. Farrell.
I have another question for Mr. Gearbaugh. Could you explain, just for the audience and for the public that might be watching tomorrow, how the pupil count works? So for example, when we anticipate revenue, it's actual/blended pupil count. And I just want to, I guess I'm trying to get a better understanding on exactly what that means.
So it means even more this year than it has in the past. So each year, as we're getting ready to build the preliminary budget that you approve in June, I look at how many students are graduating seniors, how many students do we anticipate bringing into kindergarten, where do we feel we're going to go with schools of choice in the 1st through 11th grade, and we make a projection for what we believe our pupil count is going to be. Remember, our funding is based on a blended count, which is 10% on last October's count, and no, other way around. 10% on last February's count, and 90% on this October's count. Okay? So even though I might project 2,000 students, our blended could come in more and less than that, depending on if we declined or increased, because that 10% can wag it a little bit one way or the other. This year, that's even more difficult, or a bigger change, because you see the 29.7 enrollment stabilization. They realize that districts all across the state are declining. And declining districts, it's very hard to trim your budget at the same pace that your student enrollment declines, because you may not know when you're hiring and planning your staffing exactly what your pupil count is and how much it's going to decline. So you can fix it kind of the next year, or you can lay off mid-year. We don't like to lay off mid-year. The state, realizing that, came out with a rate stabilization fund in this year's school aid budget. And what that did is, if you were a declining district, they did a blended count of the two blended counts. So they did a 50-50 blend on the 90-10 for this year and the 90-10 for last year. And so that's where that number for the rate stabilization comes in. So that helps you kind of ease into that change and gives you a little bit of funding to get through this year, and then be able to make the adjustments next year so that you're down to where your pupil count is, and you're building your budget based on actual income. Does that make sense?
It does, thank you, and I appreciate the info.
Other questions? All right, a reminder that this is a first reading of this, so we can go back and look and ask questions of Ms. Hendricks or Mr. Gearbaugh as we find them, and also at the next meeting where we will take a final vote. So again, thank you, Ms. Hendricks, for your work on this, and we will look forward to the vote at the next meeting. All right, next up on the agenda, in the area of learning, environment, and culture, we have several policy updates. I need a motion to adopt all policies, policy revisions, and policy rescissions as described in attachment C, and to further suspend the second reading requirement for these policy adoptions, policy revisions, and policy rescissions. The board finds that consistent with bylaws 0131.1, recent changes to the Michigan law creates a compelling reason to suspend the second reading requirement and to otherwise adopt, revise, or rescind the policies as described in attachment C.
Moved by Heike.
Support by Murray.
So moved and supported to adopt these policies, revisions, and policy rescissions as described in attachment C. So just a little bit of an introduction. The board has talked about moving to Troon policies from Neola. There's a lot of Michigan law that has changed with the new legislature that we had in place. The legislature went into recess early, so that because the way these laws work is once they recess, because the way the voting worked, it's 90 days after they recess, and that day happens to be tomorrow. So we need to look at these policies, approve these policies prior to that, so that we are so that we're following Michigan law. So I appreciate the work of the policy committee and Mr. Gearbaugh in reviewing these policies for us to review, for the board to consider, and we'll move forward from there.
I can just share a little bit more. You'll notice, and I put a cover document on the policy so you can kind of get an overview of what's going on. You'll notice that we are revising a few Neola policies. Those policies, it did not make sense to totally eliminate and replace with a Troon policy at this point. That will happen when we do the full change to Troon. But there were some things that we needed to adjust in those policies. So those are actually revisions to existing Neola policies. And I can, board powers, there are just some things that we need to be careful, because with things now being unprohibited subjects of bargaining, that's the term we're using now, we had stated in the policy that the board had certain powers, and the board no longer has those powers completely. They are negotiable items. In the bylaws and policies, as we make this transition, as much as I did a deep dive into the policies, I can't guarantee that we might not have a conflicting policy between Troon and Neola. I don't believe that's anywhere, but that could be. So I talked with Troon, and they highly recommended the statement that I came up with, that if we do have conflicting policies, the most recently approved policy is the one that carries the weight. In employment and substitutes, we just have to be careful there because third-party contracting is now negotiable, and so we had to amend that policy to allow for that. And in payroll deductions, we had a policy that banned collecting union dues, and we can no longer unilaterally ban those. Those have to be negotiated. It doesn't mean that we are collecting them. It just means that we can't 100% ban it. We have to negotiate that. The next section, you'll see a list of policies that we are enacting. And some of those are enacted effective tonight, and some of those are active and effective July 1st. The reason for that is the state laws, some of them change today, and some of them change July 1st. So you'll notice a lot of the ones that deal with, a lot of the ones that are being postponed until July 1st deal with evaluations and those types of topics. That's because right now we have to continue this year with our current evaluation process, and then the state law changes on how we evaluate staff next year. So we can't change that policy right now because we still have to evaluate the teachers this year in the way that we always have been evaluating them. And then July 1st for next year, we start evaluating them differently. So that's why there are some of those that have, the ones that have an R after them, that means they take effect July 1st. The ones that don't have an R means they take effect tonight with your approval. You'll then see down below a set of Neola policies that we are rescinding. All of those policies line up with one of the policies above that you're adopting. So you're adopting a Troon policy to meet the new law, and we're rescinding the Neola policy that was in line with the old law. And that's why you see some of those rescissions are happening now and some of those are happening down the road. I'll stop there. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. I think the policies, as you read them, are pretty clear. I'm not going to go through what they say, but that's the basis for why we are doing what we're doing and why it's kind of a split, some of it happening now and some of it happening in July. So with that, if there are any questions, I can answer them.
Any questions or concerns?
I just want to thank Brian because he really did the heavy lift here and getting this going, and reaching out to Troon and making sure that we were swapping out the policies that needed to be swapped out, and all the deadlines were correct, and all the language was correct. So I just want to thank him for all of his work on that, because it was a busy week for him.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Other questions or concerns? All right. It's been moved and supported to adopt all policies, policy revisions, and policy rescissions as described in Attachment C, and to further suspend the second reading requirement for these policy adoptions, policy revisions, and policy rescissions. The board finds that consistent with Bylaw 0131.1, recent changes to Michigan law creates a compelling reason to suspend the second reading requirement and to otherwise adopt, revise, or rescind the policies as described in Attachment C. Ms. Heika?
Sislo,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Heika, yes. Murray,
Yes.
Pryor,
Yes.
motion carries 5-0.
All right. Next up in the strategic plan area of personnel and leadership, I need a motion to approve Susan Kaminsky as the elementary art teacher effective immediately.
Moved by Heika.
Support by Pryor.
So moved and supported to approve Susan Kaminsky as the elementary art teacher effective immediately. Mr. Gearbaugh?
I appreciate you having the placeholder in the agenda. We were able to conduct the final round of interviews today. We also got calls back on a couple of the references. We would not be bringing you a recommendation unless we had fully followed the hiring procedures that we have in place. It was just with the timeline and the meeting being on Monday instead of on Wednesday, and the fact that if we could run the entire process and get a great person and get that person approved now, it gives us 2 weeks more of our teachers having an art teacher instead of a substitute. We were lucky to land a candidate that has 5 years of teaching experience in elementary and middle school art. She left the teaching profession, to be honest, to go work for the DIA, was told that it would be a child-centered position, and turned out to be more of an administrative position and not a child-centered position, and she realized she wants to be with kids. The reference checks with her previous district were phenomenal, and we are excited to bring her to you for approval tonight. She will still be giving her 2 weeks with her current employer. We always want our hires to respect their current employers, but at least she can give that 2 weeks now instead of on February 26th, which gets her here sooner and gets her into our classrooms. She's very excited about starting some elementary art clubs. She wants to get rotating displays in the library and a downtown business. She was doing all of those things in her previous district. So really excited. She also talked about wanting to work with the classroom teachers and making sure that her art lessons are aligning with the curriculum being taught in the different grade levels. Just, she was talking everything that we want. And she's not just talking it, she was doing it in her previous district. So we're very excited to be able to bring you a top-notch candidate for our elementary art position.
And her salary will be set via the contract?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, it will be in line with the contract as required to recognize her years of experience in her previous district.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns? Excited to have her. Sounds fantastic. All right, it's been moved and supported to approve Susan Kaminsky as the elementary art teacher effective immediately. That's
Farah?
okay, yeah. Sorry.
Farah?
Yes.
Heike, yes. Murray?
Yes.
Pryor?
Yes.
Sislo?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
All right, welcome, Ms. Kaminsky. We're happy to have you. That brings us back to communications and community engagement. Is there anyone who would like to address the board? All right. That takes us to student board representative comments. Ms. Farrell.
Upcoming events include the blood drive in the Aux Gym at MHS from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. tomorrow, and tutoring in the Milan High School Library Monday through Thursday from 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. this week. And congratulations to the high school band groups that competed in the MSBOA Solo and Ensemble competition this past weekend, and the Milan High School wrestlers who are advancing to the upcoming regional finals. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Farrell. I assume you were one of those that participated, and you did well? Congratulations. Assistant Superintendent comments, Mr. McMahon.
Thank you, Mr. Sislo. I have a few comments tonight. One, just to let you know, we've been busy with some HR things, onboarding the new principal at Simons, this is her second week, which seems like she's been here a month already because we've done a lot. And Jen's making a great transition to middle school, not requiring a ton of my help, but I'm visiting when we can. Then also the new art teacher hire, we've been busy with that last couple of days, trying to get that done swiftly, and we got a great candidate, so we're happy with that. February 2nd was a busy day of learning for our teachers. We had the PD day. Just to give you a couple highlights. At Paddock, they focused, among many things, but on small group instructional strategies, assessment analysis, and social studies collaborative planning. At Simons, also some assessment analysis, and then math and reading instructional strategies. They had some breakout groups there, along with a getting to know you activity with the new principal. Before she started, that was like her first day. At MMS, they focused a little bit on grading, the standards-based part of it, and then the thinking routines work that started this year. And at MHS, they actually did a health emergency training activity and then some disciplinary literacy training as well. I would like to share with you as well that our students will be taking the MyFi survey, which is technically the Michigan Profile for Healthy Youth. We call it MyFi, everybody calls it MyFi. That's the survey that our 7th, 9th, and 11th graders take every 2 years. Everybody in the state does this. It's an opt-in survey. It's the one that anonymously measures health-related activities, behaviors for our students, such as substance abuse, violence, physical activity, nutrition, emotional health, and sexual behavior. So we get those results back and compare it to statewide. We'll be doing that later this spring. I would also like to share with you that our SEAB meeting, our Sexual Education Advisory Board, met last Friday morning. The main focus of last week's meeting was editing the community survey that comes out every other year, where it sort of helps the board align what topics are taught at what grades. And we did some changes. We made some changes this year. It's due to the transition of grade levels. So we broke out some grades because we thought maybe we don't lump third through fifth together. Maybe we make fifth separate. And so we're breaking out some grades just to get a better read on where parents are most comfortable with what topics. So that survey will be coming out in the spring from that group. And also just a couple general grant updates. Krista alluded to one. It's called the 35J grant, which we're really just learning about. And I mean, legislative has been out there a while, but they're just starting to release some information, and they don't really know what's going on with this. It's potentially a lot of money, but we're not sure if anyone's going to qualify for it. In fact, on the webinar today, I wasn't able to attend. There's a webinar offered 3 times this week. I'm going to the one on Thursday. It sounds like a superintendent called them out and just said, screw it, I'm not even applying. It was like, because all the strings attached. But it's got something to do with potentially PD. You can use it, which requires 100% training of your staff, which is a lot of questions around that, of how we can even manage that logistically. You can't pay for any personnel, which is where you tend to spend grant funds when they're large sums. We can't do that. You can pay for curriculum materials, but there are requirements for the comprehensive needs analysis and review, which we would do in a curriculum review, which takes months, and the app's due in like 2 weeks. And so we're just trying to really figure out what can be done with this money and how we can leverage it if we can. So I'll be attending a webinar Thursday at noon, and then on my way to a meeting at Wayne Risa. They have a good access to MDE. They'll come to us there, so I go to Wayne Risa's county meetings every month. So on the way there, I'm doing the webinar, and then I'm actually going to be meeting with the people who are probably going to be on the webinar for a couple hours Thursday afternoon to try and get our heads around this. I've been working with Tracy Terrace and Tanya Saragoza quite a bit on this one, because there are literacy specialists at the elementary grades, and it's a pre-K through 5, which we learned today includes preschool, a GSRP, young 5s, all, it's not just, it's usually the grants are just young 5s and up, but this is our lower kids too. So we got to put our heads around that. We don't want to walk away from money on the table, but we got to figure out how to get it. And everybody's in the same boat. We all think there's going to be a deadline extension because there's just no way. There's way too many questions today. But we're working on that. Consolidated app, the amendments are due next week. 29th. We're going to get them done this week. Chris is on it. Chris is my right-hand man on this one. And 97J, well, I submitted a couple weeks ago and got a kickback. I got an amendment. I just got to adjust some quotes. I'm trying to get 3 years out of a 2-year grant. They want to question me on that, but we're pushing through. That's it.
Thank you. And thus, why we don't have all the figures that we need for grants. So,
Yeah. Well, and the way they ask you to make a request, and they give you an allocated amount per student.
okay,
That if everybody in this 35J is like that, if everybody in the state applied for it, you get this much.
right,
You don't know who's going to apply.
exactly.
So you don't, let's say we think in a grant, we think we might get $100,000. Well, we want to ask for like 200 in case not everybody applies, because you don't want to get approved for 100. They say, oh, well, you could have got 150.
Right.
So you have to overestimate, and then they give you your actual allocation. They have to cut your grant, and
Yeah.
it's strange, but
And I like picture some guy sitting in a room, like somebody brings him paper and he's like, this is gonna be 42J.
yeah.
This will be 55-B.
You know, I was actually going to, I have that on my notes. Just so you understand where these numbers and letters
Yeah.
come from, they are the line in the state budget
Okay.
where the money was funded to it.
Gotcha.
So I know they sound crazy, but if it's 27J grant, then that means the government budgeted that money on line 27J of the state budget.
And MD's
I've been
doing
wanting
their
to say that
best.
for a couple meetings and I keep forgetting because, yeah, the numbers make no sense unless you understand it's just like you guys have 200s, 300s, 400s on your budget.
Gotcha.
That's the state's budget lines.
Yeah, and then MD does their best to translate that into actionable work on our part, and they're
Gotcha.
struggling. We're all struggling. But
Yeah. Usually the government will budget the money with like 2 sentences of guidance and then MDE has to build out an entire program and application and approval process and everything else. So Ryan and Krista do an amazing job at that. Honestly, I don't know what smaller districts that don't have a number 2 person are doing to try and get these grants, which to me is one of the reasons I am really imploring the legislature not to continue this process, because you're really starting to get disparity in your ability to get these grant funds for smaller districts, and that's just not fair. So I do have a couple of announcements. I do want to open by saying I am providing the following update with permission from the student's mother. I spoke with her today. I would never give an update that uses a student name or anything like this unless the parent gave me that permission. On last Friday, Gino Shaw, an 8th grade student, did collapse during gym class. Our staff provided some immediate response. EMS was called and the student was transported to the hospital, where his recovery is progressing in a very positive manner, and I have been in touch with the family multiple times over the last couple of days. The family wants to thank everyone who helped their son that morning here in our building, and they also want to thank everyone in the community who has kept their family in their thoughts and prayers. Mom did ask that the continued positive thoughts and prayers keep coming as his recovery continues in the hospital. I personally want to thank Vicki Etter, Nurse Dawn Hines, Jeremy Bell, and Jennifer Bookout for their quick response to the medical emergency. I also want to thank Sean DeSarbo, Ryan McMahon, Christine Bell, Annie Kaiser, Levi Jackson, Jenny Drozdowski, Jennifer Edelbrock, Officer Brandon Marshall, Robin Walker, Nurse Ann Barton, and Lon Smith, the entire middle school staff, the Milan PD, the Milan Fire Department, and the paramedics for assisting with the emergency. And I know that's a long list, but I will tell you, we had immediate response from the staff in the building. For those that don't know, if 911 is dialed from anywhere in our district, every administrator gets a text, a phone call on their cell phone, a phone call on their desk phone, and an email that tells us what extension dialed 911. The minute we get that, a text goes out in our administrative group. The minute that Mrs. Bookout said we have a non-responsive student, Ryan jumped out of his chair and headed there. Sean DeSarbo ran across the parking lot. Lon Smith jumped in his car and was headed there. I was unfortunately at the ISD. I immediately called Ryan and he said, I got it, I'm headed there. I said, if you need me, call me. But it just shows how quick our response is and how complete our response is. Within 20 minutes, we had 2 additional counselors from the high school over at the middle school to help with the students that might be struggling. I mean, we have plans in place and they work well. 21 minutes from the time the student collapsed until he was headed out the door on a stretcher to the hospital. 21 minutes. And in that time, there were a lot of actions taken by the staff. I could not be more proud of our staff and what they accomplished for this student, and we continue our positive thoughts and prayers for him and his family. The Simons Elementary School PTO sponsored a staff-student basketball game that was a huge success. I want to thank the PTO and the teachers, especially Miss Jordette. Miss Jordette almost single-handedly did tons of planning for that event, and it turned out to be a huge success with snacks and raffles, and it's amazing, and I love to see it. So many of the staff offered up experiences as raffle items. So maybe it was cook pancakes with this teacher for breakfast this morning, or make a casserole with this teacher for lunch. The kids loved it, and I think we had over 40 of those teacher experiences up for raffle at that event, and the kids just love it. I also like the fact that they didn't do staff versus students. Each team had 3 staff and 2 students on it, and those students cycled in. So each team actually ended up having 16 students play for it. So 32 different students got to play in the game. And that was through a raffle that the kids could enter, and then they got drawn to be one of the students that got to play on the court. As Mr. McMahon said, the professional development on Friday, February 2nd was building specific. It was very beneficial. I was not able to attend many of the sessions because I was going around giving a Reimagine MAS update to each of the buildings. So I was back in my teacher mode. I gave the same presentation 5 times in one day. Don't do that too often anymore, but it was nice to get out and share the information and answer teacher questions, and the transition is going really well. The presentation I gave was almost identical to the one that I gave you at the last board meeting. On Monday, January 29th, I hosted the next session of our new teacher orientation series. Topics that we covered were classroom management, teacher evaluations, work-life balance, data usage, certification renewal, professional development, And we spent quite a bit of time talking about the Milan Area Schools' mission, vision, and belief statements. Also, the District Communication Committee met on Monday, February 5th. The committee truly is making good progress on the communication plan that we are working on. If you have any questions, feel free to talk to any of your 3 board members that sit on that committee. And the last thing I want to share is the MiFi and the community surveys. Mr. McMahon talked about these, but I do want to explain. The MiFi survey, first, students can opt out of taking it. And second, a student that takes it can opt out of answering any question. So it's totally the student's choice as to whether they want to answer a question or whether they even want to take the survey at all. It is very beneficial, though, that our students do take it, because the students take the MiFi survey, and then, as Mr. McMahon said, our community takes a survey. And what we're really able to do in the Sex Education Advisory Board is look at where do our students say they're becoming active in certain behaviors. And in the community survey, we see where do our parents want those topics taught. And then we can look to see, is there any area where those aren't in line? And what makes sense to do? And so both of those surveys come together and help us decide where we should be teaching certain things in our district. So I appreciate all of the work that Mr. McMahon's done, that Mrs. Kenzel has done on SEEB. That work, every 2 years we have this cycle, and we can really gain some knowledge from our community and our students. That's all I have this evening. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Board member comments. Yeah, Mr. Farrell.
I too want to thank our nurses, our teachers, our staff for their handling of the medical situation at the middle school. And I agree with Mr. Gearbaugh. I'm very thankful that the student is making some progress, and I just am so very proud of our administration, our nurse, our teachers, our counselors, the students. You should feel very proud, Brian, and Ryan, thank you. I just wanted to also just relay that I had an opportunity to attend a few school events. I attended a girls and boys basketball game. I think they were both winners. I'll be attending the hockey game on Wednesday this week. I was unable to attend the previous hockey match. There's also a Big Red Chat on February 20th at the Milan Middle School. I'm not sure what the topic of discussion will be, but obviously any topic that a parent or student has that they want to address with the Board of Education, or I'm sorry, 3 members of the Board of Education can do that at that time. So other than that, at some point I want to connect with Mr. Gearbaugh on just having a in-depth conversation about the sinking fund. As you know from the discussions earlier tonight, there are monies that are being spent out of the general fund for renovations, repairs, maintenance, roofs, things of that nature. Those expenses come out of the general fund. We have aging buildings, aging infrastructure. At some point, we're going to need to really spend some time having serious talk and conversation about a sinking fund. Along those lines, I'm not sure if at some point our athletic director may have needs as well that we need to address. Maybe there are things that need to be repaired, fixed, improved. Maybe we need additional, maybe there are additional needs for our students. So that's all for me. I just wanted to make those few points. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farrell. Others?
Mr. Sizzle?
Yeah, Ms. Pryor.
I just wanted to thank the staff that participated in the FAFSA frenzy. I was able to stop in last week for a few minutes before the swim meet. And as a parent who has to fill that out, I appreciate the time they took to help the students that needed it, filling that out, because it can be a daunting process to complete. I also wanted to say that I was at my son also participated in the solo ensemble over the weekend, and I got to meet Mrs. Angstad, and so she was going around seeing all the kids and doing a really great job. So I just wanted to say thank you to her.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Pryor. Others? Ms. Heika?
Mr. Sislo.
Yes.
First, I want to also thank all the staff and the teachers and the administration and the students who all cooperated during this medical emergency. I can't imagine what the parents are going through, the students, and then the student themselves, and then the staff and everything, and the teachers that were there. So just thank you, everyone, for your quick action and keeping their wits about them so that we could, help the student and get the best outcome. So thank you, everyone. I also want to congratulate the boys swim team. They had state qualifying times in all 3 relays. So everyone knows there's a 200 medley relay, a 200 freestyle relay, and then a 400 freestyle relay. I almost forgot what the last one was. And so this is just another year in a very long tradition of Milan swimming, of sending kids to the state meet. So I want to congratulate all of those boys for their hard work and for keeping the tradition going. I want to congratulate all the students who participated at Solo Ensemble. That too was a lot of work over many years to get there and be successful. And so I'm just very proud of all of you, and thank you for just representing our community in such a positive way out in the world. We've talked a lot tonight about all the time that Mr. McMahon spends and Ms. Hendricks spends dealing with these grants. And we've also talked about how we're budgeting when we don't really know what the budget is. And so I would encourage everyone to reach out to their state reps and their state senators and talk to them about this, because it is becoming, from my perspective, a larger problem than even it has been in the past. Because, our assistant superintendent, he should be focused on many other things and not spending all of this time trying to find more money to bring into the school for all these little niche projects. And I agree with Mr. Gearbaugh that I'm starting to become very concerned about other districts that don't have the resources. And we're going to start creating some big disparities amongst districts, when part of the point of the way we fund districts now was to alleviate those disparities. And it feels like we're just going to go right back to where we were before, but we're calling them grants instead of the Student Foundation grant. So I encourage you all to reach out to your state reps and your state senators, talk to them about this. Also talk to them about the upcoming budget. The governor released her budget this past week, and it is anticipated that the educational budget will not be finalized until the end of July. That is after we are required by law to have our budget approved and ready to go. So again, we will be coming up with a budget that we've kind of joked, but is a guess, because we have no idea how much money is really going to come in, and it's just a huge waste of resources and time. So please talk to your state reps and your senators about this ongoing funding problem. And I think that's it.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Heika. Ms. Murray?
All right, thank you. Good evening. I'll take a moment also just to echo and reiterate and praise and thank our staff and all of our administrators and our first responders and our students. It hits close. These are former colleagues and a former student of mine. So I've certainly been, holding them in my heart all this week. And so just want to express my deepest gratitude. And you never want to have to see a crisis response team fly into action and go sailing past your classroom door. But as a person who's witnessed it happen, I can just truly attest to the incredible adeptness that our staff demonstrates when a student is in need of or anyone is in need of our assistance in our buildings. So just thank you again, and best wishes to Gino and your family. Hope that you're all recovering. And then I think the only other thing that I wanted to bring to light this evening was I got an email yesterday from the Justice Leaders Collaborative. I'm on their mailing list because I've done a number of their courses. And I'll just wanted to let the board know that I'm going to forward it to your board email so that you can take a look at the available courses that are coming up starting this month. And for really anybody in the community, they are free to people who reside in Washtenaw County. I don't think that you have to be an educator or an educator adjacent type of person to participate in these courses. And just for the board's awareness, they have quite a few coming up this cycle that I think are really relevant to the work that we are doing and the work that we intend to get going more so in terms of our DEI initiatives and policies in our district. So I have one on socially just language, a toolkit for responding to pushback, a deeper look at the EJAT, which is the Education Justice Assessment and Transformation Tool, which is a great piece of reading. And I don't mean that sarcastically, it's actually an incredible tool. Discipline deep dive, which is piquing my interest. It's a look at your discipline data and what it may reveal about your school and your classroom rules and values. Socially just hiring and retention practices. So there's more. I won't go through all of them, but definitely would encourage the board to take a look at that email when I send it. And all of their offerings are virtual, so you can do them in your PJs at a time that works for you. And I just, yeah, again, they are fantastic courses, a lot of research-based and very dedicated socially just educators who work on these classes. So with that, that's all I've got.
Cool. Thank you. And we look forward to that email. Thank you. I thank you, Mr. Farrow, for bringing up the Big Red Board Chat. It is Tuesday, February 20th at the Milan Middle School, so I will be contacting you to firm that up as far as who's going to participate and what a topic may be. But as Mr. Farrow said, we'll be there to talk about anything at that Big Red Chat. So, and a final thank you again. You just can't do it justice. The care that any staff member has for the students of Milan area schools is unbounded. So, and it's demonstrated every day, regardless of medical emergencies or teaching or cleaning up or feeding or transporting. There's miracles that happen every day, and there's a miracle that definitely happened on Friday. And we are thankful for the staff that participated in that. So, any other questions or comments? All right, meeting is adjourned at 7:57.